And welcome back to another week of deck building with Bahumaut. This week we're going to be looking at one of the oldies but goodies. This deck is similar to a deck I used way back at the start when Origins first came out. It was great for grinding up gold then, and it's still effective now. So let's dive right in. So we're going to be looking at pure red to begin with. Now, the focus of this deck is on quick attacks combined with dealing indirect damage. So, for example, if your creatures die, they inflict damage. And that damage racks up over time. You'll also have a few removal spells for tougher creatures, things like that. So we'll begin with Goblin Glory Chaser, so 1 mana. So you can have him out on the field in the first turn. He also gets Renown, and as soon as he gets Renown, he gets Menace, which makes him even harder to stop. Plus, if you stack enchantments and things like that on him, he can be a real annoyance on the battlefield right from the start. So 3 of those. Now, one of those indirect damage sources I was talking about just a second ago, we have Goblin Arsonist. As you can see there, 1 mana for a 1/1 creature, but whenever it dies, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now, you get to choose the target, which is the main point. So depending on the situation, you may want to destroy a weak creature or just deal some chip damage to your opponent. There's also some cards that take advantage of that when you sacrifice a creature to deal extra damage, things like that. So this card is actually multi-purpose. So we'll put all 4 of those in as our frontline annoyances. Similar thing, but triggered, is Ember Hauler. So 2 mana for a 2/2, but at any point you can sacrifice it and deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So once again, targeted strike, plus we can also use that 2/2 just as to hold the line from the start. All of these abilities, the damage of these abilities can also be increased by another creature we're going to add in later. So we'll put in 3 of those. Now, as I was talking about before, so this is one of our cheap removal spells, but as you can see, you have to sacrifice a creature to activate it. Well, for us, that isn't really an issue because that makes us deal extra damage, so there's no real loss here. Plus, it deals 5 damage to target creature, which is quite a nice amount for 2 mana. So we'll put all 3 of those in there. Now, because this deck revolves around speed, we want our creatures to be continually attacking and getting haste as much as possible. So one of the best ways to do that is Infectious Bloodlust. So as you can see, 2 mana gives a creature +2, +1, and haste, but it does force you to attack each turn with that creature. That's the only downside. But when that creature dies, you get to automatically put another Infectious Bloodlust in your hand from your library. So that means at least you're continually drawing more enchantments until you run out of all 4. So generally that's more than enough. So putting all 4 in is the best idea because then you're getting the maximum use out of that card. Another enchantment that works very well with this deck is Inferno Fist. Even though it's not one of the most powerful enchantments, because you can see here we have Goblin Warpaint, which does a similar effect but gives you toughness. The main thing for us is the second ability you can see there, which allows you to deal 2 targeted damage, and once again we can pump up that damage with a later creature as well. So very, very useful, that targeted damage, and we'll see why later on. So all 4 of those. And another one we want to include is our Planeswalker, Shandra. Now once again, this is targeted damage, so we'll be buffed by our later creature. And since all of our spells are going to be red, it's not very difficult to actually flip her, unlike some other decks. So, and especially since a lot of our cards are quite cheap. So she's going to be a great little addition to our forces. Another really good removal card here that doesn't require any prerequisites, unlike the other removal card we had before. So just straight 4 damage, and especially if you've cast 1 or 2 before, can't be countered, which can be a lifesaver in certain situations if you're playing against a blue deck, for example. So both of those. Now in combination with our enchantments, so as you can see there's four enchantments, 2 lots of 4, so 8. As you can see there's 8 enchantments in the deck so far, so that's quite a large proportion. These combine very well with Flaring Flamekin. So you can see there, 3 mana for a 2/2, not that great, but as soon as you put an enchantment on it, gets +2/+2, gains trample, and can be powered up by additional red mana. So, for example, if you put Infectious Bloodlust on it, it's going to gain +4/+3 haste and trample. So it's going to become a 6/5 creature with haste, trample, and can be powered up by additional red mana. So as you can see, it ramps up in power extremely fast, which is works very well with our quick attack strategy. Now, another one of our really useful early attackers is the Crowan Sergeant. So 3 mana for a 2/2, but you have permanent first strike, and you also gain Renown 1, so which makes it a very good target for enchantments to buff up its attack because of the first strike. Or you can use the Rogue's Passages and things like that we're going to add in, or your removal spells to clear the way to allow him to trigger that Renown ability. So all 4 of those in. Okay, and one of our biggest annoyances in this deck, even though it may not seem that much at the start, but we have Ember Hellion. So you can see there, 5 mana cost, 4/5 with trample. But the main thing we're interested in is the second ability down the bottom. So if another red source, that includes creatures, spells, enchantments, you name it, would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to the permanent or player instead. Now, with the amount of indirect damage abilities we have in this deck, that adds up extremely fast. So, this can be extremely deadly if used the correct way. So definitely put both of those in. For more indirect damage, you can add in Cinda Hellion. So 4/4, trample, but it also deals another 2 damage. So once again, it's quite handy and a good target for enchantments. We have the second form of Shandra, so the later version. Now she works very well with this deck as well. See the top ability there, put 2 3/1 elemental creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield. That allows you to keep the pressure on your opponent. You can also use her in an emergency situation with the -X ability to just nuke the battlefield. And remember, some of our cards have upon death deal indirect damage, so that will help deal additional damage. And as a final annoyance, we have Devil's Playground. So, while very expensive, as you can see, 6 mana, it's very good at slowing down your opponent's attacks. Especially since it spawns 4 1/1 red devil creatures that when they die, they deal 1 indirect damage to an opponent or creature. And especially since we have a Hellion to make that damage increase, it all adds up. So we have 2 Devil's Playgrounds, and that takes us to our lands. Now, since indirect damage is the key to this deck, and speed of course, We have Blighted Gorge, so put in all 3 of those. We also want to get our creatures through when possible, so Rogue's Passage works extremely well with this. And for the rest, just put in regular mountains. And that brings us to 60 cards. So as you can see there, that deck's complete. And let's move on to, let's have a look at our breakdown. Okay, so since we're only 1 mana type, we don't really have to worry about that. And you can see that the curve there is extremely balanced towards cheaper cards. So our speed is going to be extremely high. We have a large number of creatures, so our strength is probably going to be quite good. We have a few removal spells, but not too many, so our control is probably going to be sort of low. And we don't have a lot of creatures with the same abilities, so our synergy is probably not going to be that high either. But since the mana costs of most of our cards are so low, you should always be in a situation where you're able to play something, even if you get mana starved a little at the start of a match. So as predicted there, you can see our speed is quite high, our strength is quite high, our control is fairly low, and our synergy is also fairly low, as I mentioned before. So as you can see there, it's a deck that revolves around fast damage and continual chip damage that just adds up as the battle keeps going. So the main counter to this kind of deck is large amounts of life regeneration, which can counteract the chip damage, or a large number of flyers, because sometimes they're difficult to deal with, as there isn't a lot of flying defense within the deck. But the main counter we have for flying opponents is to use our indirect damage to take down the flyers. So it will slow down the effectiveness of the deck having to fight against a flying deck, but you should be able to deal with a few flyers at a time. So anyway, let's move on to the testing bed. Okay, and we're off. Alright, so we've got our Goblin Glory Chaser in our opening hand, which is good. Plenty of mana. Now our only danger will be if we get mana flooded from the looks of things. Alright, so we've got our Glory Chaser on the field very quickly, which is nice. And if our opponent plays something that's a little tougher, we can play Infectious Bloodlust and buff up that damage. Okay. So, we can play Infectious Bloodlust. Should hopefully allow us to get past the 1/1 and trigger the Renown ability. No, okay, well, we removed his creature anyway, so that's fair enough. And especially since that's a particularly annoying creature, so I'm happy to have removed it early. Okay, we'll play our Arsonist. And attack with our 3/2 again. Okay, well that gets rid of our Glory Seeker, but gives us our Infectious Bloodlust back. Now we could play it on our 1/1, our Arsonist, but we might save it for now. Okay, so, now, I could play Flaring Flamecoon, but he would likely be killed by Sinister Concoction. So what I might do is attack with the 1/1 before playing anything, and see if I can lure the 2/1 to blocking. If not, then I'll wait and see what I draw next turn. Okay. Alright, so we got a spare Bloodlust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it on our Arsonist, and once again see if I can trigger off that kill ability that's on the field at the moment. Nope, still doesn't want to kill off my Arsonist, so I really don't want to play my Flamekin until it's gone. And I'm going to use Devil's Playground next turn anyway, so either way there's going to be a lot of annoying creatures on the field. Okay, it's been removed, which will allow us to get rid of the flyer, which I'm quite fine with. Okay, so we get to our 6, and we can use Devil's Playground, because it doesn't matter if they get killed off by the kill spell, it's on the field. But at the moment it's holding things up a bit, which is a bit annoying. Okay, so I'm going to keep Exquisite Firecraft in hand for now, and attack with all my 1/1s. Because if the 4/2 does block any of them, they'll kill him as a result. Okay. Alright, since our 1 damage won't kill the 4/2, we'll target the player instead. Okay, now that kill enchantment is gone, we can actually start playing some of our stuff. So we'll chuck Ember Hellion out to start increasing the damage. And next turn we'll play Flaring Flamekin with Infectious Bloodlust, which will give it haste so we can attack straight away. And remember now that all our damage is increased by 1 because of Ember Hellion. Because even though we didn't have the best of starts overall, we were able to slow them down enough to actually get our powerful abilities out. Okay, which is fine with me. Okay, so as you can see now, they only have limited options. And we can attack at our leisure. There we go. Game, set, match. Okay, so as you can see there, the impact Hellion has on the field, but also the importance of having creatures that deal damage when they die, because they allow you to retaliate against more powerful creatures, especially those which have unbalanced power and toughness. So especially those that have high power but low toughness, as we saw there, because a lot of those black vampire cards have extremely high power but not so much in the way of toughness. So that upon death ability is a great stopper for that. First Strike would have also been especially effective against that kind of deck as well, because you deal your damage to your opponent before they can deal damage with their superior power. But as you can see, there's a lot of options with that kind of deck. Infectious Bloodlust just keeps coming back, and you can keep enchanting your creatures continually. You can make tweaks to the deck, so you can make it slower but more powerful, or you can add in more removal cards, that kind of thing, if you want it to be more of an offensive spell deck. Or you can put in instants and sorceries that add trample and increase creature power if you want to just get them through to your opponent. So if you wanted to tilt it more towards renown, you could do that. So you just remove some of the upon death cards and change them, because there's quite a few renown creatures in red. So you could swap some of them out, give some of those renowned creatures trample using instants, and you'd be fine with that kind of deck as well. So there's plenty of options to tweak this one to whatever kind of playstyle that you want. But the core concept is there, of dealing quick, fast damage that ramps up as the game progresses. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas in your own deck designs, and I'll see you next week with deck building.